Report to Congress by Comptroller General of the United States Management and Plans for the Naval Petroleum Reserve of the Department of the Navy. The United States owns many billions of the Petroleum Reserve oil fields, which are being maintained by the Navy until needed for the defense. The report discussed with the Navy the management of those properties with recommendation improvement of the Navy, the contract administration, and the reserve. This report also discusses recent legislation to authorize production from reserves under the legislation responsible for the custody and exploration of the biggest reserve, was shifted from Navy to the Department of Interior. May 14, 1976. To the President of the Senate and House, Speaker of the House of Representatives, this is our report of the Navy's activity to develop, maintain Navy Petroleum Reserve. Our review was pursuant to the request of the Senator Michael Gravel, who has agreed that the report should receive with an unrestricted distribution. We are sending copies of the report with the Director, Office of Management, Budget, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Navy, Secretary of the Interior, of the Administrator, Federal Energy Administration, the Administration, Energy Research Development Administration, Comptroller United States of the United Comptroller General of the United States. Alright, digest. By law, the Navy has the custody of the federal lands containing the huge reserve of the petroleum and thousands of the acres of the oil shale. Traditionally, those were held for the national defense of the Navy was responsible for the managing the following reserve. Petroleum number 1, Elk Hills, California, proven the reserve is estimated at 1 billion barrels. Number 2, Buena Vista, California, nearly depleted. Number 3, Teapot Dome, Wyoming, proven reserves estimated at 40 million barrels. Number 4, North Scope, Alaska, not explored, but expected to contain far more than number 1. Oil Shale number 1 and 3, Colorado. Number 2, Utah. After 1973 Arab oil embargo, public attention was focused on extracting the reserve of the peacetime use on the most appropriate federal agency to manage them. The Government Accounting Officer reviewed the relevant issue in conjunction with the request of the Senator Gravel to examine the Navy's management of the reserve. In April 1976, the Navy Petroleum Reserve Production Act of 1976 was enacted. The law was basically provided for to transfer the management responsibility of the Navy Petroleum Reserve Number 4 to the Department of Interior June 1st, 1977. Retaining of the Navy the management responsibility for the Petroleum Reserve Number 1 and 2 and 3 increased the production of the reserves for a 6-year period. The production period could be extended for the approval of the Congress. Navy plans to more than fully develop the Petroleum Reserve of the Number 1 and Number 3. Estimated cost of $535 million, raising the production to over 400,000 barrels a day. However, with additional pipelines not provided in the Navy, the cost estimate of the production rate of Number 1 cannot be achieved. Petroleum Reserve of the Number 2 has been producing for a year, is now almost depleted. Petroleum Reserve Number 4, oil shale reserves are undeveloped. Petroleum Reserve Number 3 for the Navy has no formal procedures for systematically testing oil wells, ensuring the problem is detected or solved. Navy said it has requested proposal for the new operator contract and has started to develop a formal maintenance and testing program at the reserve. In the past, the Navy has taken the position that it's not required to file for the Armed Services Procurement and Regulation activities pertaining to the Petroleum Reserve. The consequence of the Navy, the procurement of the reserve has not been corresponded with the generally used for the defense agencies. Does not ensure the best interests of the government are being served. If in the view of the Government Accounting Office, the comments of the Department of Defense and the Navy, the assistance for the official Office of the Federal Procurement Policy are considered the applicability of the Armed Services Procurement Regulation to the Navy's Petroleum Reserve activities. Navy is disposing of petroleum products properly. Government Accounting Records. Government Accounting Office recommends for the Secretary of the Navy to instruct the Director of Office of the Navy and Petroleum Oil Shale Reserve to establish contracting procedures for the conformity to the Armed Services Procurement Regulation. Review modified necessary recently awarded contracts operate with the Petroleum Reserve Number 1 and 4 to include the provision of the procurement regulation. Comply with the newly established contracting procedure for the new operator contract with the Petroleum Reserve Number 3. Alright, digest. Chapter 1, Introduction, Status of the Reserve, Recent Legislation. Chapter 2, Navy Management, Petroleum Reserve, Contracting, Supply, Service, Contracting, Controlling Contractors, Activities, Disposing Oil, Gas, Produce. Conclusion, Recommendations. 3, Navy Plan for the Petroleum Reserve Number 1, Elk Hills, Petroleum Reserve Number 3, Teapot Dome, and Petroleum Reserve Number 4, North Slope. Chapter 4, Appendix, Scope. Review Appendix 1, letter dated February 9, 1976 for the Acting Secretary of the Navy for the Naval Petroleum Oil Shale Reserves. And then it has a second letter in Appendix 2, 3, 4, and 5. A principal officer responsible for administrating activities discussed in the report. Alright, ASPR means Armed Services Procurement Regulation, DCAA, Defensive Contracting Audit Agency, Department of Defense, DOD, GAO, Government Accounting Officer, ONPR, Office of Naval Petroleum Oil Shale Reserves. Chapter 1, Introduction.